It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is exactly 9 p.m., 2100 hours Central African time or South African Central Time, a very standard time rather. Very good evening to you. Warm welcome. This is Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube. We are also on the DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, bringing you 60 minutes of the very latest news from the heart of the continent to all corners of the globe. Wherever you're listening from, please do dial into our WhatsApp hotline number. Share your thoughts on some of the big stories of the day and the perspective that we're sharing. +2763 406 9126. Lots to cover this evening, so let's get straight to it. Here are your top stories.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And we start with this. The United Nations peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo will send reconnaissance flights to the eastern city of Uvira as part of preparations to help monitor a ceasefire between the government and rebel groups in that area. M23 captured Uvira in December and withdrew a week later under pressure from the United States. Following the withdrawal of the rebels, the DRC army moved back into the town last month. The parties have since agreed to activate a Qatari-mediated ceasefire monitoring mechanism, part of a broader framework negotiated in Doha to halt fighting. The acting head of the UN peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO, Vivian van der Peer, says the first aerial reconnaissance mission to Uvira will take place in the coming days. The South African Human Rights Commission is calling on the government to declare the current water crisis a national disaster. The call comes amid the ongoing protests over water outages, which have left communities with dry taps for weeks. The Commission says the water crisis has reached a level where a broad, integrated and coordinated effort is required to turn the dire situation around. Diteboho Damane has those details.
The SAHRC has expressed concern that the absence of water at schools affects educational outcomes as learners are forced to miss school. It also stressed that the disruption has a detrimental impact on hospitals and clinics, impinging on the right to health care. The Commission warns that the declaration of a national state of disaster should not become a breeding ground for corruption and embezzlement of funds. It says sufficient oversight measures to ensure fiscal prudence should be instilled. And staying in South Africa, the International Committee of the Red Cross in that country says it is stepping up its diplomatic efforts to address Africa's escalating humanitarian crisis. Patrick Yusuf, the ICRC's Regional Director for Africa, will meet government officials and diplomats in Cape Town to draw attention to the urgent needs of civilians caught in conflict and to advocate for stronger political commitment to international humanitarian law. Yusuf explains.
It is to take proactive actions at regional but also at continental forums. Upcoming is the AU Assembly, and there we're really expecting a louder voice on making sure that a war continues. The belligerents respect international law, but they also respect the basic principles of humanity, meaning those who are not fighting be afforded the right protection, and those infrastructures that are supposed to serve the local population, from providing water to health services, that they are not to be targeted. And therefore, it is practically very possible, after being very vocal, to truly take measures and steps to make sure that during armed conflicts, these laws are respected.
Ethiopia's Foreign Affairs Minister Gideon Timotheus has warned that unconstitutional changes of government and growing global geopolitical competition are posing a risk to Africa's peace, stability and development. Speaking during an AU meeting in Addis Ababa, Timotheus added that shifting global power dynamics are increasingly shaping how major powers engage with Africa.
our continent is still grappling with incidents of unconstitutional change of government, which are undermining the normative foundations of our union. The evolving geopolitical landscape in which multilateralism and global cooperation are being eroded is also adversely affecting peace and security in our continent. Fierce competition for technological supremacy, control of critical mineral resources, and major logistics routes are becoming a dominant feature of international relations. Trade and economic cooperation are becoming subordinated to political and security considerations. In this context, many big and middle powers are viewing Africa as a site for their competition and as an instrument of their ambitions.
Timotheus went on to say that African unity remains essential for the continent's collective security, highlighting recent cooperation on UN Security Council reform, climate justice and changes to the global financial architecture.
As we gather here today, sitting under the umbrella of our union, which was established with the purpose of achieving political independence and economic integration, we are reminded of the importance of unity for our collective security, independence, and prosperity. This past year, we have witnessed mixed developments in our continent. It is encouraging to note that we stood together to promote a common position with regard to UN Security Council reform, climate justice, and the reform of the global financial architecture. A common position on these matters was on display, in particular in the first G20 held on African soil in South Africa.
And finally, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa Executive Secretary Claver Gatete says water and sanitation must be recognized as critical economic infrastructure, warning that limited access threatens Africa's productivity and development. Gatete was speaking at the opening of the 48th Ordinary Session of the African Union Executive Council at AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Gatete says it is concerning that more than 300 million Africans still lack safe drinking water.
Indeed, water and sanitation are not merely social services, but economic infrastructure. When viewed through an economic lens, access to water becomes a measure of productivity readiness. However, across Africa, more than 300 million people still lack access to safe drinking water, and roughly 780 million lack adequate sanitation. Water-related diseases such as cholera, diarrhea, and typhoid continue to claim lives across continent, causing approximately 115 preventable deaths every hour in African region, according to World Health Organization. The economic implication is significant. Poor water and sanitation reduce labor productivity, increase health expenditures, and discourage investment.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
And at 8 minutes past 9, let's tell you about our top story this hour. Just a few moments ago, I dare say 20 minutes ago, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa wrapped up his State of the Nation address. He said that he will be establishing a National Water Crisis Committee to address the country's ongoing supply challenges. Speaking during that address, Ramaphosa said officials will face the long arm of the law if found to have contravened the country's water provision laws. The address comes as Ramaphosa seeks to balance the needs of his citizens with those of the political parties that form the government of national unity. We look now at this year's State of the Nation address and whether it signals a change for South Africans. To speak a little bit more, we joined by political analyst Dr. Ongama Mtimka, who speaks to us from Cape Town. A very good evening to you, Ongama. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Mtimka. Let's start with your impressions about the speech. Every year, the State of the Nation address, we look at it somewhat with half-bated breath, because some of us say this is the year we see real change and others say it's more rhetoric. What were your thoughts about it?
Sure. Good evening to you and your viewers. Thank you for having me here at Tsepiso. I think that the length and breadth of the speech covered much of the areas of crisis that we are confronting as a country in terms of the quality of municipal infrastructure services and the consequences that has on service provision in communities. I think the big issue, and it was interesting to hear Julius Malema speaking to your colleagues earlier today, citing the deployment of the army to the Western Cape and Gauteng. And for me, I think that that's a good intent in terms of how government wants to gain control of the crime situation. In fact, just as the president was starting the presentation and commenting about how the international stage has shifted towards a might is right approach rather than a rules-based international order, I was sitting and thinking, but South Africans, in fact, have observed through various commissions and their realities, the mighty and the powerful seem to be getting their way with impunity. And I was happy to see that the president later on in the speech went on to address those issues that give South Africans the impression that the mighty and strong are in fact having a field day in the country. So there's good potential areas. And I think the other aspects, one other thing that stood out for me.
Before you go to what else stood out for you, because I do want to touch on that when you talk about the mighty and the powerful. There is pretty much towards the end of his speech what he spoke about, the issue of sovereignty, South Africa refusing to be bullied and standing by those whose freedoms have not been yet realized, speaking about nations such as Palestine, right? And I also want to juxtapose that with the controversy around the comments made by Gauteng's Premier by Nyaza Lesufi over the water crisis. And, you know, the question then becomes, is it grandstanding on the one level to say we will stand firm when it comes to fighting other citizens' rights, civic rights, and their right to dignity and self-determination? But what about here at home?
Yeah, no, the reality of the matter is that we are anything but truly sovereign when you look at all the vulnerabilities that we have, whether it's in the system of international trade or it's in the ability of the state to satisfy critical needs such as water and electricity and sanitation. And the crumbling infrastructure that the president cited does point to an inability that municipalities, and it's not just municipalities, a paper that we're working on with colleagues looking at from an infrastructure from a systems point of view, shows that it's the whole of government and other stakeholders that are failing even the local government system, because the money in order to fix critical infrastructure that's necessary for, as you say, those human rights, these basic services which form part of our human rights, comes from the national fiscus and from the intergovernmental system. Some of the approvals that are required in order to undertake mega infrastructure projects come from the intergovernmental system. So the point is that we are anything but sovereign, which is why some people often cite the need for us to prioritize domestic imperatives, even as we continue to campaign for a rules-based international order. So it's one thing to speak with bravado on international affairs while you are extremely vulnerable on many fronts domestically.
All right. So I know I interrupted you when you were going to point to your next area of interest in terms of what the president highlighted.
Sure, it was going to be the successes as far as the investment promotion efforts are concerned. I know that the president did cite this thing last year of how much money has been raised through all the investment seminars. And he updates that figure by saying that it's about 1.5 trillion, in terms of which about 600 million has gone into factories and other things. It would be interesting to get a proper report, that says where exactly did these investments go? Which factory in which part of the country? It's not enough for the president to just say those investments have been realized and they've gone into factories, because it matters, Tsepiso, whether foreign investors are acquiring stakes in existing businesses or are going into greenfields developments. And we need more of the latter to respond to the job creation imperatives of our country.
And we'll get to job creation in just a moment, but I just want to, give a high-level summary of what he said about our economy. He claimed that GDP has seen a growth in 4 consecutive quarters, that inflation is at its lowest in 20 years, that the rand has strengthened, and that debt, we're on a path to stabilization. JSE best performing exchange in Africa. Credit rating has improved. Load shedding has ended. But I'm just wondering if South Africans on the ground, are they really feeling that? Do they feel like, life has improved? Because he started off his speech by saying, we've improved, we're doing better, but we're nowhere near where we ought to be. Does his speech reflect that, just in terms of the ordinary man on the street?
Certainly, the macroeconomic indicators that the president cited are welcome, but the growth that we are talking about for the whole of last year is not sufficient to create the numbers of jobs that South Africa needs in order to truly make a dent on poverty and unemployment. Yes, indeed, he did cite that there's been a decline on food poverty rates in South Africa, which is appreciated. He was citing the Stats SA report that got released around about mid-December last year. But again, if you look at other aspects of poverty, those remain an area of concern for a country like ours. So we truly need a government that can catalyze development. Much of the infrastructure projects that are cited do, create the potential to do that, given the infrastructure-led growth that seems to be apparent throughout his presidency. But I think that it's important to not just strengthen the areas that are already well developed. I was listening, for example, in terms of the high-speed train between KZN and Gauteng, Durban and Joburg, and then Messina. Some of the catalytic projects that are required in order to truly make a dent on unemployment are infrastructure projects outside of the main economic hubs. Which infrastructure projects would catalyze development outside of the core areas in these major provinces of Gauteng, the Western Cape, and KZN? And Tsepiso, unless our government is prepared to do that, we will continue to have provinces that are lagging behind when it comes to their development. And we must understand that the building of infrastructure and to enable development in this country was always political throughout history. And Limpopo, the Eastern Cape, and other provinces were deliberately kept poor so that they could become labor-sending provinces. So if the democratic government is not doing significant initiatives enough to broaden the spatial development of the country, it's not doing well in that sense, and growth will always be marginal.
And part of the complaint in the past has been when government, even through President Cyril Ramaphosa, mentions the green shoots that he sees not only in the investment coming into the country, but in jobs in certain sectors, that it is very vague. And it is said that we need to grow in terms of GDP by beyond 3% if we're going to see a real reduction in unemployment, which it sits at about 42%. But you spoke about infrastructure, and I want to tie it to that. Earlier on, we had the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa Executive Secretary say that water and sanitation must be recognized as critical economic infrastructure. Now, for the president to have to declare a national disaster, that did not happen overnight. Water infrastructure has been collapsing. Who is going to be held accountable? He said heads must roll. Are we going to really see that?
Well, if you look at the way the system is structured, some of the responsibility, or in fact the majority of the responsibility, is placed on the doorstep of local government. Now, as the president said, the model of devolving powers and responsibilities to local government is flawed in the sense that it's not based on competences and potential to succeed, in the sense that municipalities are not endowed equally with revenue sources so that they can be able to deliver on this mandate. So I'm happy that he mentioned that as part of the ongoing white paper on local government discussions, there's a view to say some of the powers must not be assumed to be devolved to municipalities, willy-nilly or as a one-size-fits-all approach. And by the way, Tsepiso, we have done a competency-based devolution model in housing delivery as well as metropolis rights. So municipalities have to meet particular thresholds in order for them to be to have certain powers devolved to them. So I'm answering your question in a long-winded way. What I'm saying is that though much of the responsibility rests with local government, there is a need to ensure that across the entire government value chain, as it were, from national to local government, there's collective accountability. Because part of the frustrations that are taking place at local government level are not truly located completely in that sphere. And I mentioned we are working on an article with colleagues that tackles that issue.
And would that look at the so-called federal nature of the provinces and local government? And does that also drill down to a need to look at how councils are funded, monitored, and whether they ought to be taken over?
Absolutely. And also some responsibilities would rest with either national or provincial government, unless municipalities meet certain requirements in order to have those devolved. So you're quite right. It relates to, and the fortunate thing is that South Africa chose a unitary state model as opposed to a federalist. Yeah, but even though sometimes the way in which we treat mandates has got more federalist notions. So we are calling for accountability in a truly unitary state fashion.
I want to talk about crime because that has been very central to the public discourse and what has really captured South Africans' imagination. The Madlanga Commission, what's coming out of it. And there's been skeptics of it saying, Madlanga Commission, nothing has come out of the State Capture Commission. I want to look at the symbolism of this and how President Ramaphosa said that, they really are committed to dealing with crime. You mentioned what the leader of the another leader of the opposition, Julius Malema, also had to say about the deployment of the army. What is really going to change, where some even forensic analysts are saying the rot is so deep that unless you fire all and you start all over again, because he spoke about the fact that, for instance, lifestyle audits are being done and that there's 93% compliance. How many South Africans are really going to believe that we have law-abiding, citizens, especially in the civil service, when there is so much reported in terms of corruption at the helm?
The system is rotten. What I appreciate is that throughout notwithstanding the rottenness, we do have pockets of excellence that can be used as springboards for greater reforms in the public service and particularly in policing. I was watching with pride our special forces and their seeming success in the recent, trending international competition of SWATs. And for me, it points to why, for example, we've had very successful campaigns by the specialized task forces of police when there's commitment to actually deal with, for example, cash and transit heists and other things. So to me, those are pockets of excellence that show that when we have when we have no interference with police work, we are able to deliver good results, and multidisciplinary teams can do that. So it calls for greater leadership across the police service and also greater leadership on the political front to get rid of the rot that is there. And part of it, by the way, may have to do with the fundamental way in which campaigning for office, securing office and remaining in office among politicians, is inherently creating an environment for a political criminal nexus to thrive, and therefore constraining the extent to which the administration in general and the police and law enforcement in particular continue to be compromised. So I agree with you that we have a general problem that is multifaceted and multidimensional when it comes to ensuring that South Africa has got leadership that it deserves, that is ethical, that is committed, that is excellent. But I'm saying part of it has got to do with the ways in which political office gets to be campaigned for and secured.
Dr. Ongama.
And that's why, for example, you're going to hear the president, if the reports are true coming from the weekend, that the Senzo Mchunu, saga is something that he's prepared, and I'm paraphrasing, to be criticized on.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, your insights as always. Political analyst Dr. Ngama Mtimka wrapping up the South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa State of the Nation address. He says, we have fixed the economy, now it's time to fix the state. And some of those measures that he mentioned included stricter border control, including also on immigration, saying that people are really going to be held to task for hiring immigrants who are in the country legally. He spoke about a digital state, including online police statements that are going to be affected. All that and more. Of course, we'll continue hearing more about that here on Channel Africa. That's it for the State of the Nation address wrap here in South Africa.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Across Africa, communities rise with the promise of clean water and clean sanitation. The African Union's 2026 theme calls us to action.
It's about mobilizing real commitments, securing climate-resilient water and sanitation projects, and ensuring that water becomes a driver of sustainable development and prosperity across the continent.
A landmark moment, not only for Africa, but for the global movement for access to safe water for all.
Assuring sustainable water availability for every home, every village, every nation. This is the Africa we want.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
And it is 29 minutes past 9 here on Africa World Hour. We continue talking about some major themes that really, impede the growth and development of the continent. One of the themes is this: water. The 39th Ordinary Session of the African Union Assembly, bringing together African heads of states and government, set to take place this weekend at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, held under the theme Water as a Vital Resource for Life, Development and Sustainability. The summit will focus on accelerating progress towards sustainability, towards the continent's water, sanitation and hygiene targets, in line with African Union's Agenda 2063. Ahead of the summit, international non-profit organization WaterAid is urging AU leaders to commit to stronger, decisive action to achieve this goal. For more on this, we're joined now by WaterAid's Regional Director for Southern Africa, Robert Kampala. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Robert. We've just been talking about the crisis that South Africa is facing in its most populous city, which is Johannesburg. But obviously water is a crisis across the continent. Just how severe is it?
Thank you. Good evening to you, and good evening to your listeners. As you rightly pointed out, water is indeed a very critical and basic human right for everyone. I want to start by, quoting President Ramaphosa a few minutes ago, where he said, open quote, "Water is the most single important issue for many people in South Africa." And I think that can also be said that it is a single most important issue for many people on the continent of Africa. With regards to your specific question in terms of how severe it is, the scale of the crisis is very alarming. We're talking about 418 million people lacking basic drinking water, 779 million people lacking sanitation, these are toilets, and approximately 839 million people lacking hygiene services. As you'd have also noticed in our call, we also refer to about 1 million women and newborns who die annually from infections linked to poor water and sanitation. So the scale of the challenge or the crisis itself is very huge.
And what, if at all, are African governments doing about it? Are they acting with haste? Because as you were saying that, I was thinking about that we've seen more and more severe cases or incidents of cholera outbreaks as a result of lack of clean drinking water, sanitation and hygiene, and dying from those preventable deaths and diseases. So are African leaders acting with haste and the requisite urgency?
That is where the challenge is. That is where the challenge is, because the sense of urgency is lacking. We are missing the sense of urgency. And how would we notice that there is the sense of urgency? One is around the prioritization of the issue, where water, sanitation, and hygiene is prioritized as a key developmental issue that drives economic growth. But we are not seeing that. We are not seeing governments increasing the level of financing water, sanitation, and hygiene remains seriously underfunded. As we speak now, most governments, they are spending less than 5% of their national budgets towards water and sanitation. And yet we see other sectors that are increasingly getting huge resources, and a basic issue such as access to clean drinking water and sanitation does not get the same level of prioritization. So there's no sense of urgency at the moment.
Now, I want to understand if countries are doing this. Are they doing the necessary work to integrate policy frameworks when it comes to linking health, water, security, and sanitation?
Africa is not short of policies. We have enough policies. And at the continental level, there have been many continental commitments that have been made by African leaders. In terms of the delivery of those commitments remains a challenge. And the issue of integration is happening, but not to the extent where we would want to see it happening. We see integration sometimes taking place. A good example within our own programming as an organization, we integrate water, sanitation, and hygiene into health, into education, and into nutrition. But you don't see, stronger ways of working and the integration taking place, coordination between the different sectors. So there's a lot of fragmentation that's taking place within the different sectors. So it is, again, another area where we would want to see strengthened integration and coordination between the different sectors.
Are there any of the Southern African countries that we can point to that we can say, there is a sense that they are working hard towards that interconnectedness in the policy frameworks and implementation? Because if one thinks about, for instance, the situation in the Sudan, which the United Nations Secretary General has called the worst humanitarian crisis, we see that interlinking crisis of water, sanitation, health, and security, and why there's so many people who will die unnecessarily, and not necessarily because of being attacked by bombs, but because of the lack of infrastructure.
Absolutely. You are very right on that in terms of, how the issue is interconnected to various aspects. It becomes a security issue, it becomes an economic issue, it becomes a food security issue because of the critical role that water, sanitation, and hygiene plays in achieving outcomes, be it in education or in health, or indeed driving economic growth. In terms of the examples of, are there governments that are doing this? You see that it's at varied levels, different countries at various stages. As I indicated, with regards to the policies, you find the interconnectedness linkages are being made, but at times it's about how do the implementation itself are taking place and the disjointed financing of the same. And, with regards to a specific country that I can give that this is a shining example, probably I would not be in a position to give that. But you might find that, say, Madagascar, you see maybe stronger integration of wash and nutrition. South Africa, you see how South Africa has moved, strongly in integrating water, sanitation, and other sectors.
Okay.
So you
find. Let me ask you this question. You have written to AU heads of state ahead of the summit with specific commitments or actions that you're asking for. What are you urging leaders to do as development partners or to prioritize?
Our call is simple because this is a very key moment, and we are very excited that the AU has decided to focus on the issues of water security, sanitation, as a key theme for its conference. In terms of the key actions that we are calling for a clear political signals and commitment from our heads of state and government that WASH becomes a priority, it becomes a top tier development, as well as informs health and climate prioritization. We are also looking for increased and predictable financing. Here, we would want to see governments that are able to, put stronger emphasis on domestic resource mobilization, and would want to see increase the allocation of financial resources towards the WASH sector, at least to 5% of their national budgets. And also, when it comes to sanitation, there's a clear monitoring of the spend towards sanitation, for example, towards the 0.5% of the gross domestic product. More importantly, we want to see a clear presidential level leadership by the heads of state and government through an existing initiative that's called the Heads of State Initiative, in short called HOSI. We want to see many countries joining that initiative and making sure that we have clear presidential level type of leadership.
Okay.
But finally, and more importantly, is the need for clear time-bound national roadmaps, especially scaling up of water sanitation and the hygiene services in healthcare facilities, where governments or member states are able to develop cabinet-endorsed posted national roadmaps with first health budget allocations for water and sanitation. That's our call.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Robert Kampala. Much appreciated your time and sharing with us your thoughts. He is the Water Aid Regional Director for Southern Africa, speaking to us about the 39th ordinary session of the AU Assembly that is set to take place with the heads of state and government sitting this weekend at the AU headquarters, and what their pleas are and what they believe are the major challenges facing the continent.
Across Africa, communities rise with the promise of clean water and clean sanitation. The African Union's 2026 theme calls us to action.
It's about mobilizing real commitments, securing climate-resilient water and sanitation projects, and ensuring that water becomes a driver of sustainable development and prosperity across the continent.
A landmark moment, not only for Africa, but for the global movement for access to safe water for all.
Assuring sustainable water availability for every home, every village, every nation. This is the Africa we want.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa. And that's exactly what we seek to do. We seek to educate, elucidate, and of course share with you the various perspectives that are coming out from the continent and beyond, and bring your perspective to the fore. Let's continue with some of the stories that we're looking at. Angola's President João Lourenço has called for a ceasefire between the Congolese government and the M23 rebels to begin on February 18. Speaking as chairperson of the African Union, Lourenço is backing ongoing mediation efforts aimed at ending the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. SABC correspondent in Kinshasa, Chris Ochamringa.
A statement from the Angolan presidency says the proposed ceasefire in eastern Congo should take effect on February 18th. The announcement follows a meeting in Angola between President Felix Tshisekedi and several African leaders to discuss ways to end the fighting. But previous ceasefire deals signed by the DRC government, Rwanda, and M23 since 2021 have repeatedly collapsed. Kinshasa says it's ready to respect the latest truce. However, Rwanda's foreign minister has questioned whether the Congolese government will fully honor the agreement. Meanwhile, fighting has intensified in eastern DRC since the beginning of the year despite ongoing diplomatic efforts by the United States and Qatar. Angola has taken the leading role in trying to broker peace and is expected to host an inter-Congolese dialogue in Luanda, although no date has yet been announced. Regional leaders continue to push for a political solution to the long-running conflict which has claimed thousands of lives. Chris Ochamringa, SABC News, Kinshasa.
United States President Donald Trump insists that negotiations with Iran continued when he met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu privately in Washington on Wednesday. The two leaders did not have a media briefing following their discussions, but Netanyahu's office issued a statement following the meeting. Blake Sifton reports from Tel Aviv.
Following his meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu at the White House on Wednesday, President Trump said that he insisted to the Israeli leader that negotiations with Iran should continue to see if a deal can be reached. He also said that he told Netanyahu that a deal would be his preference. Prime Minister Netanyahu issued a statement after the talks saying that the two leaders discussed Israel's security needs in the context of the negotiations, and the two agreed to continue their close coordination and relationship. Now, this was the seventh time that Prime Minister Netanyahu has met with Trump since the president began his second term in office, but this was a much more private affair. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu did not hold a press conference. They did not issue public statements like they usually do. And Prime Minister Netanyahu entered the White House through an entrance that was away from where reporters had gathered. Prime Minister Netanyahu was widely expected to push President Trump to widen the scope of the negotiations with Iran. Israel is very concerned that the United States could pursue a more limited, a more narrow deal with Tehran that's focused on the nuclear program and that doesn't address Iran's ballistic missile capabilities or its support for regional proxy groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Houthis in Yemen. Well, Israel does want a nuclear deal with Iran, and they do want an end to Iran's enrichment of uranium and for all enriched uranium to be taken out of the country. They also view Iran's ballistic missile capabilities as an existential threat. During the 12-day war with Israel in June, Iran fired some 550 ballistic missiles at Israel. Around 50 of those successfully evaded Israeli and American air defenses and caused widespread destruction in Israeli cities. Israel wants the United States in these negotiations to insist on limits on Iran's ballistic missile production, on their capabilities, and limits on their range. Iran has repeatedly and emphatically rejected this. They say their missile program is for defense, and it is a non-negotiable red line. Blake Sifton, SABC News, Tel Aviv.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
It is now 13 minutes to 10. This February, the Johannesburg Theatre in South Africa is bringing you the legendary and soul production of Motown, an ode to the original 1960s production. The production promises not to be just a tribute, but a cultural journey through the dreams, struggles, and redefined popular music of a generation. To tell us more about this, we're joined by the show's producer and general manager of programming at the Johannesburg Theatre, Lindiwe Legasapa. A very good evening to you, Lindiwe. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm thinking 60s. Okay, there's still quite a few who can relate to the 60s, 70s, a little bit more 80s, yes. But you know, my 2000. How do you market that event to them? How do you say, come, this is what Motown is. Motown is a movement. Motown is, you know.
You know what? I'm laughing because we were just talking about this, and I was making an example with my son and saying, my poor thing sings music from the 90s and early 2000s because that's what I was listening to when I was driving him to work, to school. I mean, so you'll be very surprised. You'll be very surprised that they can jam to this music. But also, it's not just the 1960s that we are commemorating. We are also looking at 70s, 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s because Motown has been a home to so many musicians. It didn't just end in 1960. Yes, it might have started then, but the movement continued and it became a home to more and more of musicians that we've come to know and love today.
And it really does depend on, as you say, where you grew up, the music that you're exposed to. So for a lot of us, we know those music or those music tunes from the 60s because our parents, our family members used to. It became a family moment. But just that, some would say, American culture, when music is so completely different. Why did you think it was important to bring that era to the Johannesburg stage in 2026?
As part of the Black History Month, we wanted to celebrate music. And I mean, we looked around, we're like, okay, we've been doing productions every year to celebrate Black History Month, American written productions. And this year, when we thought about music, the only word that came to everyone's mind was Motown. And I mean, if you know our artistic director, James Ngobo, he is an avid fan of Motown. And when we started talking about it and just unpacking what it is that we would do with this music, it started unraveling so many other things that were happening during the times, especially in the 60s when it was so tough, during the times when people could not just release music, particularly Black people. And, in Detroit, someone, Gordy, with a very brilliant mind, decided, you know what, I'm going to create a space where musicians of any color can produce music, can write their own music, and they can sing without any prejudice or any restrictions. And so Motown became like, you know what? It just makes sense. It makes sense for us to just go that route. And I am so glad that we did.
And it comes down to sadly checkered past in some instances. When we talk about ownership, it was a source of pride, a Black-owned label for musicians. But it also does bring home that question about how South Africans, Black South Africans, relate to African Americans in terms of segregation. Is it a shared history? Is it something that can coagulate around and say, there is fellowship in how far we've come and where we are now?
You could say that. You could absolutely say that. And I mean, we look at how after democracy in South Africa, so many producers started producing South African music. I mean, we look at Galawa, so many musicians have come out of Galawa in South Africa. And we could measure it up with Motown as we're discussing it now. It's not too different. You look at the history of Black Americans and the history of South Africans is so similar that it becomes hard for you to separate the two. And like you said earlier, we grew up listening to this music. At that time, it didn't make any sense, but you listen to it now and you realize that some of it was actually protest music, but because it wasn't called that, we called it soul and R&B and neo soul and all of that. But you listen to it now and you're like, actually, that was a cry for help. Oh, actually, that was telling us what's happening in that area during that time. And so the similarities are there if you were to look very carefully. And hence I'm making an example of Galawa Jazz. And Galawa produced so much music in South Africa and gave so many artists an opportunity. almost similar to what Motown did during that time in Detroit.
And Motown certainly had its icons just in terms of identity through that protest music. But what has become beautiful about it through the years that you've seen younger artists, musicians remake that music. And I'm thinking of what Gladys Knight did with the Boyz II Men song, End of the Road. I mean, that was a reminder of what Motown was and she says that to Boyz II Men. I'm glad they're still doing it, that type of music. So how are we doing this with this production in terms of the lineup, multi-generational artists who are going to be on the stage?
We're doing it with an amazing 5-piece band, all South Africans, amazing 5 females that are singing, well-known such as Tamara Day, such as Lerato Mvelase, but also young and upcoming, such as Hlengiwe Pearl and Lizelle from Jamali. I don't know if you guys would remember her. Beautiful voices. And Anele, who's just coming out at the moment. So that mixture of musicians that have been in the industry as well as the ones that are upcoming has really brought out what we wanted it to bring out. There's a surprise element, and we didn't want to say too much about it. And because you mentioned Boyz II Men and a collaboration with Gladys Knight, we have iComplete, who will be coming out with their beautiful male voices to sort of complete the whole production of music. So we really have something for everybody, you know. We've got the eye candy and we've got the beautiful music. So we've got a bit of everything for everybody.
And speaking about the eye candy, what can we expect from a visual perspective?
Okay, so the Mandela stage will be completely transformed. It will be like you've never seen it before. I don't want to give out too much, but think vinyls. Think a set based in a studio in Motown somewhere, without giving too much. So think about being welcomed into a space, a sacred space, almost an exclusive space that is just for you. Like you know, when
you've cracked the ultimate invite to that exclusive party.
Yes, but remember when we used to have listening sessions?
Yes.
Think about going into a listening session for Motown music.
Wow. Okay.
Exclusively.
Okay, and let's talk about when and how, tickets, etc., etc.
Okay, tickets are available on our website, joburgtheatre.com. The show starts on the 20th. It's a very short run, 20th of February until the 1st of March. So be sure to catch it because it's a very short run. It opens and literally closes the following week. So joburgtheatre.com. That's where you get your tickets.
And quick one about the times.
We've got shows on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 7:30, Saturday at 7:30, Sunday is a matinee, it's an afternoon show.
All right. We look forward to that. Thank you so much for speaking to us about that. That's a very exciting show coming up featuring the Motown production era that is at the Joburg Theatre, and that is the General Manager of Programming, Lindiwe Lekasapa, speaking to us about that. Brings the time to 3 minutes to 10, and Shayla Ndukumana in the studio fanning herself. I don't blame you, honey. It sounds like a hot show to be at.
I love what you did there, Tsepiso. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm the only one who's glistening today. I see that.
No, but it is hot. It is hot in the city.
What is going on during the day? I want to unpack
I'm
the
lying
daytime.
on my couch like a whale while I'm busy working, and I've got the fan on and off because there's the allergies that you know your nose just can't take it. But at the same time, your face is right there. It's a lot.
It's offensive.
Global war. Yes, offensive. The weather is offensive. I love it. I love it.
Okay, on African Diaries this evening, we're going to be talking Talk Thursdays. And in the first hour, we look at trading. I'm excited.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to trade. You know that certain phones offer you like the stats of what's going on. I've never understood how we read those. And so joining us will be John Bernard Dill, who's a trader. And he's going to be walking us through the analysis part of trading. And then in the second hour of the show, we are going to be talking all things Symphony on the Water. This is happening.
Wow, so beautiful.
And it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. So we have seen an uptake in cultural events incorporating beautiful, scenic, natural features such as lakes, dams, rivers, right? It's not just the coastal feel that we're getting. Imagine an orchestra by a lakeside.
Listen, anything with a body of water excites me. I'm just so drawn to that.
Yeah, so that's happening on the 7th of March. So we're going to be speaking to a representative of the KwaZulu-Natal Tourism and Film Authority who will be joining us. In actual fact, this is a conversation that we're going to catch up on. We spoke to them earlier today.
So where is this happening? In KZN?
In KZN.
And
at
what's it called?
A Symphony on the Lake.
Oh, sounds so... Are we going?
Yes, we have to go. We
We
have
are
to go.
invi-
We
we're
have to
invited?
eat. Ma'am, please.
Okay.
Hug your backs.
You're picked. Consider them picked. And that's coming up on African Diaries. It's African World Hour to African Diaries. You see, it's like a seamless flow.
Symphony on the water. I love that. I love that.
All right, that's how we say goodbye from the team. Until the next time, it's goodbye for now. Enjoy the rest of your viewing and your listening here.
1 hour, one continent, one voice.